Hey everyone, welcome to part 122 of my Pokemon game series in Unity. So in this video we'll start the implementation of the Pokemon storage system. So we'll start by creating the UI for the Pokemon storage. So the UI will have both the storage boxes and the player party in the same screen. And the user will be able to change the selection between the boxes and the party members like this. Alright, so let's look at how to implement this. By the way, you can support the making of the series on Patreon and get access to some cool rewards like the complete project files of the series, exclusive tutorials, and access to the Discord community. There is even an entire course on Patreon that covers the creation of a 3D Pokemon game like this. So if you ever wanted to learn to create 3D RPGs, then check out this course on Patreon. The first few videos are free to watch if you want to just try it out. So let's start implementing the Pokemon storage system. So first, let's start building the UI for the Pokemon storage. So before I start creating the UI, I want to make sure to apply all the changes that we have in the Essential Objects prefab. All right, let me go ahead and do that. And then we can go inside the UI canvas prefab and start creating our Pokemon storage UI. Okay, so let me just disable the summary screen and I'll create a new game object called Pokemon storage. Okay, so I want this to cover the entire screen and I want this to have a background. So I'll add an image component to it. Okay, and for the background color, I'll just give something like this green color. So the storage UI that I'm going to build is going to be similar to the one that you see in the new Pokemon games, like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, right? So on the left side, we'll have the current party, and on the right side, we have the box. All right. So I want to divide the screen into two parts. All right. So first I'll create a game object called left, and then I'll duplicate that and I'll create another one called right. Okay. Just like we did for the summary screen. And I'll arrange these two game objects by using a horizontal layout component. All right. So right now the left and right components will take up equal width, but I want the right component to take up more width. So what I'll do is I'll add a layout element component to both the left and right game object, and I'll turn on flexible width. And for the left, I'll keep the flexible width at 1, and I'll increase the flexible width of right to 2. All right, so now the right part will take up more width. So next in the left part, we want to create the current party list. So here I'll add another game object called party list. Okay, and let me just stretch it and make it cover the entire area, and then we can reduce it a bit. So I'll reduce it from the top like this. We can set the top to something like 100, and for the other paddings we can give something like 20. Okay, so this is the area where we'll show the list of Pokemon in our party. So let's add the game object for showing the Pokemon. So I'll just create a new image and I'll call this box party slot. All right, and I'll change its color to a transparent color like this. All right, and let me turn it into a prefab before I start duplicating it and creating more slots. Okay, and now I'll duplicate it and create 6 slots for our 6 Pokemon. And then we can just use a vertical layout group for the party list to arrange this. Okay, so actually I don't want this to control the height. I only wanted to control the width. So I'll set the height manually. All right, I'll set the height to something like 75. Okay, and I'll actually give it a little bit of spacing so that we can differentiate these slots. And I want these slots image to be a bit like a rounded rectangle. So what I'll do is for the image of the slot, I'll give the background image that comes with Unity by default. So this is that background image. Okay, so this image has rounded corners, and once we use that image, you can see that our box has a slight rounded corner right now. Okay, so now we have a list of slot for showing our party. So inside the slot, we need to add the UI for showing the details of the Pokemon. So first, I'll go ahead and add an image. I'll call this Pokemon image. Okay, I'll make its size something like 75 by 75. And let me just give it a placeholder image. And I'll just move it towards the side like this. Okay, and next we need to add text for showing the name and level of the Pokemon. So first let me add a text for the name. I'll call this Pokemon name. Let me put it towards here, and I'll change its text to Pokemon name. And let me also change its font. I'll make it a bit bigger, and I'll change its color to white. Okay, I'll just resize it so that it doesn't overlap with the Pokemon image. Okay, and then I'll duplicate it and I'll create the text for the level. Okay, I'll just call this level text, and let me also change the default text in it. All right, so that's all we need in the party slot. So next let's create the UI for the box. So I'll create that in the right part of the screen. So under the right game object, I'll go ahead and add a new game object, and I'll call this box slots. All right, so let me make it stretch and cover the entire area, and then we can reduce its size to give it a little bit of padding. So for the top, again, I'll give 100 as the padding. And by the way, I'm leaving some space at the top because we'll have headings. All right, and for the other paddings, I'll give something like 25 or 20. 20 should be good. Okay, so inside this game object, we're going to have lots of slots as grid. So let me just add one slot first. So I'll add a new image, and I'll call this box slot, and I'll make its width 75 by 75. Okay, and I'll also change its color to this black transparent color. And let me actually make it a prefab before I start duplicating it. Okay, and now I'll duplicate it and create a few extra slots. So we want to arrange these slots as a grid. So we can do that by using a grid layout group. All right. So here we can specify the cell size. So we want that to be 75 by 75. And we can also add a little bit of spacing. Something like 5 should be good. Okay. So this will arrange our box slots as a grid. So we want 6 columns and 5 rows. So let me keep duplicating it until we have that. Okay, so now we have 6 columns and 5 rows, 30 slots overall. Okay, and I also want the background of the slot to be rounded. So I'll use the background image that comes with Unity by default. Okay, this is the one. So now it's rounded. And then inside the box slot, we should show the image of the Pokemon. So let me add an image and I'll make it cover the entire area of the slot. And I'll just add a placeholder image. Okay. So this is how our box slots are going to look like. Okay. So next I want to add a heading for the party list and the box slots. So first let me add a heading for the party list. So in here, I'll add a new image. Let me just call this party heading. I'll just place it above the party list. Doesn't really matter because I'm not going to use a vertical layout group to arrange this because we just have 2 elements. But I just like to keep it at the top because it's at the top in the screen. Okay. So again, I'll make the image rounded by using the background sprite. And I'll change the color to this black color. Okay. And let me reduce the height to something like 40. And I'll set the width to match the party slot. Okay. Maybe I'll reduce it a bit, something like 35. All right. And inside this, I'll add a text. Okay. Let me make it cover the entire area. And I'll change its font. All right, let me change the alignment to center. And let me just change the color. Okay, so the heading will be current party. All right. And then we can also duplicate this and create another heading for the box slots. So let me change its name to box heading. And for the text, I'll just give a placeholder value like box1. Okay, so this will be the name of the box. And I think we can make it a bit more bigger. Yeah, that looks fine. So yeah, this is going to be the UI of our storage. Maybe we can reduce the width of the heading a bit. Yeah, that looks better. So yeah, this will be the UI of our storage system. So next let's create a state for the storage system and let's show this UI and start handling the selection. So let me create a state for the Pokemon storage. So under scripts in the game states folder, I'll go ahead and create a new state called StorageState. Okay. So let me get rid of the default code. And this is going to be a state of game controller. Okay. So just like for all our states, I'll also make the state a singleton. So I'll create a public static instance of it. And I'll initialize it from the awake function. All right. So when we enter the state, we have to show our Pokemon storage UI, right? So let me also create a script for the Pokemon storage UI. So I'll create it inside the UI folder. Okay, and we can attach it to the Pokemon storage game object. Okay, so this UI will be a generic selector, but I'll be handling the selection data. First, let me get a reference to it from the storage state and write the code for showing the UI. Okay, I'll create a serialized field reference, and then when we enter the state, we have to show this UI. So I'll write the enter function, and from here, I'll show the storage UI. Okay, and we can also disable the storage UI when we exit. So I'll also do that. Okay, so next we need a way to go to the storage state, right? So in older games, the player will have to go to the PC to be able to open the boxes. But in new Pokemon games, we can access the box from the menu itself. So that is something I like about the new games. So I'll go ahead and add the boxes in the menu itself. So let me just disable this and open the menu. And here I'll add a new menu item and I'll name this boxes. Okay, so we also have to add a text slot to it to make it selectable from our generic selector. And let me also assign the text reference. Okay, so that is all we need to do here. So we can disable this. And next, from the menu state, if boxes are selected from the menu, we have to push the storage state, right? So one thing I noticed over here is that we haven't handled the save and load menu items. So I guess we removed it once we did the refactoring and we forgot to handle the save and load after that. I'll be doing that later. First, let me test the storage state. So if the selection is equal to 4, then that means boxes were selected. And if so, we have to go to the storage state. Okay, so now if we select boxes from the menu, we should go to the storage state and show the UI for the storage. So let's try testing that. So first we have to attach the storage state to our game controller. So let me do that. And to this, we also have to assign the Pokemon storage UI. Okay, so let's try testing it now. So when we select the boxes, it should open the storage UI. All right, so that is working fine. So next, we need to handle selection in this UI. So we should be able to select different items from the box or from the current party. So handling selection here will be a bit tricky because the player can select both the party slot and also the box slot, and the player will be able to go between them. And another thing that will be tricky about the selection here is that, unlike before, we won't be highlighting the text over here while selecting it. Instead, we'll be highlighting the background of the slot, right? We'll be changing the color of the background of the slot. So we haven't done a selection like this before, but still it'll be pretty easy to implement because we already have a flexible generic selector system with which we can handle custom types of selection. So let's go ahead and implement selection. So for implementing selection, first we have to make the storage UI a generic selector. So I'll inherit from the selection UI class. And we can't make this a selection UI of text slot, right? As I mentioned before, in the storage UI, we don't want to change the text color. Instead, we want to change the color of the background image, right? So we can't do that by using a text slot. So instead, we'll have to create a new type of slot. So I'll go inside the generic selection UI folder, and here, along with the text slot, I'll create another slot called image slot. Okay, so this will implement the selectable item interface, just like our text slot. Okay, and the code of the image slot will be pretty similar to the text slot. The only difference is instead of changing the text color, we have to change the color of the background image. So we can actually just copy this whole thing. We don't need the set text function because we don't have to set the text in the case of the image, but we can copy everything else and paste it over here. Okay, so here are the differences. We have to set the color of the background image. So we can get an image from here. Let me just import the engine.ui namespace, and we can just rename this to something like background image, BG image for short. Okay, and by the way, we could even cache this from the awake function instead of getting it as a serialized field. So the reason why I'm doing that is because there are lots of selectable slots in the box, so I don't want to assign references to each one of them manually. So to save time, we can just cache it from the awake function. Okay, so I'll get the image component by using the get component function, and we are changing the color of the background image when the selection changes, right? So we don't want to use the same highlighted color that we use for text. So we can create a new variable and call it something like background highlight color. We can rename this to text highlight color if you want, just to make it more clear, but I'll just leave it like that because if we change the name, we'll have to reassign the color. Okay, I'll also create a property for our background highlight color. Okay, and we can use that over here. All right, so this is all you have to do in the image slot. So now we can make the Pokemon storage UI a selection UI with image slot as the selectable item. Okay, so in our UI, both the box slot and the box party slot will be an image slot. So we can go inside the prefab and attach the image slot strip to it. Okay, let me also do it for the box party slot. So both of these will be selectable. All right. So next we have to get the list of box slots from here. So I'll create a serialized field variable for that. Okay, so I'll get a list of image slot and I'll call this box slots. And then from the start function, we can call the set items function and set the box slots as the selectable items. Okay, and from here, we also have to call the set selection settings function of the selection UI because the selection type for this UI is grid and not list, right? So we need to call the set selection settings function and pass grid for the selection type. And for the grid width, I'll pass 7. Okay, so you might be wondering why I'm passing 7. So here we have 6 slots for the box, and the party slot is also a selectable item, right? So if I'm over here and if I press the left input, the selection should change to this, right? So we are going to treat this as a single selection UI. So these won't be two separate selection UIs. Okay, so when you look at it like that, we have 7 slots in a single row, right? So the grid width will be 7. Okay, so this will set the selectable items to the selection UI. So next, from the storage state, we have to call the handle update function of the storage UI. So first I'll override the execute function, and from here we can call storage UI.handle update, and that will handle the selection for us. Okay, so now the only thing we have to do is assign the box slots, and we should be able to select them. So assigning the box slots is going to be a bit tricky because, as I mentioned before, this whole thing will be a single selection UI, right? So the first selection slot will be this, and the next one will be this, and we'll go further. And after this, the next slot will be this one, right? So this whole thing should be considered as a grid. So in the selection slot, the first one will be this slot, right? So we can add that to our box slots. Let me just log this inspector. So the first one will be this slot. So we can drag that to the list. Okay. And the next one will be this slot, right? This one. So we can drag that as the second one in the slot. And then it'll be this and this one after that, and so on, right? Until this, it is in the right order. So we can copy everything from this to this and attach it to the box slots. Okay, so we have assigned all the slots in the first row. So once we complete the first row, the next slot will be this one. Okay, so let's attach it to the list. Okay, and then we have to attach the slots from here to here. Okay, from 6 to 11, I believe. Yeah, from 6 to 11. So we can attach that to the box slots list. Okay, so yeah, attaching the slots is a bit tricky. You have to make sure that the order is correct, right? The first one will be this and then this. But after this slot, again, we'll have to assign the party slot and so on, right? So just make sure to assign them in the right order. So we have assigned till box slot 11, which is this one. So the next one will be a party slot. So I'll assign the party slot 2, and then I'll assign box slots from 12 to 17. Okay, and then I'll assign the party slot 3, and then I'll assign slots after 17, so from 18 to 23. All right, and then I'll assign the party slot 4, All right. And after that, we have to assign the box slots after 23. So 24 to 29. So let me add that to the box slots. And finally, we have to add the box slot 5. Okay. So yeah, just make sure to attach it in this order. And now let's try testing this. Let me just disable the Pokemon storage UI by default. And we also have to set the background highlight color. So I'll just set it to a yellow color like this. Okay. And now let me try testing the game. All right. Let me open the storage. And you can see that the selection works. So this whole thing is considered as a grid. And from here, if I press the left input, it'll go to the party. And from the party, if I select the right input, it'll go to the box, right? So we have implemented selection similar to the one in the Pokemon games. So next we have to fill the data in the party and the box correctly. Right now we're just showing placeholder data. So we'll be doing that in the next video. So I'll stop the video here. If you think this video is helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel. That'll be really helpful for me. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.